Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on a lecture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's by this Colombian historian, Diana Uribe.
Interesting.
It's called Especially las mujeres en la historia. And
Okay.
basically it's all about, the history of women's rights and how their role in society has, evolved.
Okay.
So many surprises, so many twists and turns you might not expect.
Yeah, what's really cool about Uriva's approach is that she doesn't just present it like this
Right.
simple, march of progress.
Yes.
It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
There's moments of real equality,
Mm.
but then like periods of regression and erasure too.
Yeah, it's like history keeps trying to hit the undo button on women's progress.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Uribe takes us back to these early societies like the Vikings and the Celts.
Oh, wow.
And, she paints a picture that really challenges our assumptions about women's roles.
Yeah, like what?
Well, in these societies, women weren't just relegated to the home.
Okay.
They had power and influence. They could be warriors, landowners, even spiritual leaders like the Druids.
Really?
Yeah, it was all about shared responsibility
Interesting.
and a more balanced social structure.
I mean, Viking warrior women.
Right.
That's not
Not the typical.
the image that comes to mind.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how much we're missing from these traditional historical narratives.
Yeah, it really highlights how our view of the past can be so limited
Right.
by the perspectives that have dominated.
And, speaking of shifting perspectives,
Okay.
Uribe points out that Viking women actually lost some of their rights
Really?
when the Vikings went through Christianization
Hmm.
and adopted those continental European norms.
So it's not a simple line
No.
from oppression to liberation. It's like
Yeah.
this complicated dance.
Yeah, a dance between progress and setbacks.
Exactly.
And it shows how these societal shifts, especially those driven by external forces,
Yeah.
can have these unintended consequences for women.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. New religious and cultural frameworks often impacted women's roles and status
Yeah.
in unforeseen ways.
This is a fascinating insight.
It is.
Makes you think about how even changes that seem positive can have these downsides we don't expect.
Right.
And this complexity continues as we move into the Middle Ages.
Thanks. So.
Uribe challenges that common idea that this whole era
Right.
was oppressive for women.
Yeah, you always hear that.
But it's not so simple.
Yeah. Well, women in the early Middle Ages definitely faced limitations.
Okay.
It's not the whole picture.
Right.
As time went on.
Yeah.
We see women becoming really influential.
Like,
Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Yep.
She had tons of political power
wow.
and even introduced this concept of courtly love.
Courts of love.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, it was like a formal system
Okay.
for resolving romantic disputes,
Huh.
often led by women.
Really?
Yeah. I know
Wow.
it sounds strange now,
Yeah.
but it reflects how much influence women were gaining
Okay.
in shaping social norms.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. It shows how women could assert their agency,
Mm-hmm.
even in a system that seems so restrictive.
So even back then,
Yeah.
we're seeing women break free
Right.
from these constraints, exerting their influence,
Yeah.
shaping the world around them.
Exactly.
But then as we move into the modern era,
Yeah.
things get kind of dark.
Yeah, Uribe describes it as a descent into invisibility for women.
Invisibility. What happened?
Well, it's when access to knowledge and power
Okay.
becomes really restricted.
Mm.
And women's contributions
Yeah.
minimized or just like erased.
Wow.
One of the most striking examples is the persecution of women as witches.
Oh, yeah.
Like during this period,
Mm-hmm.
women who knew about herbal medicine
Right.
or midwifery,
Okay.
or just women who were independent or challenged social norms, they were often targeted and accused of witchcraft.
It's just chilling to think about how fear and,
Right.
societal anxieties
Yeah.
could lead to such violence
Yeah.
and oppression against women.
Something like their very existence was a threat.
Right.
And what's even more ironic is that this is happening
Yeah.
at the same time as the Enlightenment.
Right. With reason and progress.
Exactly.
But not for women.
Yeah, for women.
Okay.
Access to education and intellectual pursuits
Yeah.
became even more restricted.
Wow. It's a reminder that even these periods of
Right.
supposed enlightenment can be full of
Right.
prejudice and inequality.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder about our own blind spots today.
Totally makes you think
Right.
about our own assumptions.
Yeah.
And making sure that progress
Mm-hmm.
benefits everyone
Absolutely.
not just a few.
Right.
So we've seen glimpses of equality,
Yeah.
moments of progress,
Wow.
but they always seem to be followed by these attempts to erase women or suppress their contributions.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, in the 19th century,
Okay.
we see the start of this more organized and sustained fight for women's rights,
Right.
especially for suffrage.
Mm-hmm.
Uribe talks about Olympe de Gouges.
Okay.
She was this revolutionary figure
Mm-hmm.
during the French Revolution.
Well, the French Revolution was all about liberty, equality, fraternity, right?
Yeah, but
But
those ideals weren't for women at first.
really?
Yeah, de Gouges challenged this.
Mm.
She drafted a Declaration of the Rights of Woman and of the Female Citizen
Wow.
in 1791.
Okay.
She argued that women should have the same rights as men,
Okay.
like the right to own property,
Right.
the right to education,
Yeah.
and the right to participate in politics.
It's amazing to think about her courage and her vision.
Right.
It makes you realize how long and how hard women have been fighting
Yeah.
for these basic rights.
But it came at a price.
What do you mean?
Well, she was executed for her beliefs in 1793.
Oh, wow.
It's a tragic reminder
Yeah.
of the risks women took
Right.
to challenge the status quo
Yeah.
and demand equality.
But her legacy lived on,
Yes, it did.
inspiring others.
Yeah, it's a reminder
Yeah.
that progress isn't easy.
Yeah.
It takes sacrifice and struggle.
Makes you appreciate the courage of those who came before us
Yeah.
and paved the way for the rights we have today.
Speaking of the fight for suffrage,
Yeah.
Uribe highlights a key moment
Okay.
in the early 20th century,
Mm-hmm.
the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City in 1911.
Oh, yeah. That was awful.
It was.
Tell me more about that.
Well, this fire killed 146 garment workers,
Hmm.
most of them young immigrant women.
That's so sad.
It was.
And it really exposed
Yeah.
the terrible working conditions and
Yeah.
lack of safety
Yeah, like no safety regulations.
that so many women face.
It's heartbreaking to think about those women
I know.
trapped in that fire. Their lives cut short
Yeah.
because of negligence.
Yeah, and a lack of basic protection.
Exactly.
Well, the public was outraged.
They were.
I mean, this tragedy really galvanized the labor movement
It did.
and fueled demands for better working conditions.
Yeah, especially for women.
Right.
It also played a key role in establishing International Women's Day,
Oh, wow.
which we celebrate every March.
So even though it was horrible,
Yeah,
this tragedy became a catalyst.
it did.
It shone a light on
Yeah.
the injustices
Mm,
that
mm.
working women faced
Yeah.
and inspired action.
Right.
But what about the world wars?
Oh, yeah.
Did those change things for women?
Absolutely. World War II especially
Okay.
saw women stepping into roles that men usually had
Yeah.
because the men went off to fight.
Right.
Women ran factories,
Mhm.
kept the economy going,
Wow.
and proved they were capable in so many ways.
That's amazing. So it sounds like World War II, was this turning point
Yeah,
for women. It's
Yeah.
this chance to
right.
show what they could do,
Yeah.
contribute to society in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
Did it last? Did that empowerment last?
That's the thing.
Okay.
The war opened up opportunities.
Right.
But then there was this
Yeah.
effort to push women back into the home
Oh, really?
once it ended.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole nuclear family ideal.
Right.
Husband's the breadwinner,
Yeah.
wife's the homemaker.
Mhm.
It was really promoted.
It's like society took 2 steps forward
Right.
during the war
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
tried to take a step back.
Exactly.
It's so frustrating.
It is.
You see that pattern all through history.
Yeah, it shows how ingrained those traditional roles were,
Right.
even after such a huge upheaval.
Yeah.
But this pushback,
Mm.
it actually sparked a new wave of feminism.
Okay, so this is where Betty Friedan comes in.
Yes.
Her book, The
Yeah.
Feminine Mystique. Uribe calls it a scathing critique
It is.
of that enforced domesticity.
Mm.
She even calls it a comfortable concentration camp.
Wow, yeah.
That's powerful.
It was powerful.
Yeah.
And it resonated with a lot of women
Right.
who felt stifled
Yeah.
by those expectations. Friedan's book helped spark the second wave of feminism,
Mm.
which challenged gender roles
Right.
and demanded equal rights.
And this is the 60s.
Yes.
Such a time of change.
Huge change.
The civil rights movement,
Yeah.
anti-war protests, the
Mm.
counterculture.
The feminist movement was part of all that. There was
Yeah.
a time when people were challenging authority,
Right.
demanding change,
Yeah.
envisioning a new society.
And women were Organizing.
Yeah.
Demanding equal rights.
In all these areas.
Like what?
Like work pay, sexuality,
Okay.
bodily autonomy.
Uribe mentions Margaret Sanger.
Oh, yes.
And her fight for birth control. What role did that play?
Well, Sanger was essential for the fight for reproductive rights.
Mm-hmm.
She believed women should have control.
Okay.
Over their own bodies.
Right.
Their own choices.
It was a radical idea.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of opposition with people who wanted to control women's sexuality and reproduction.
But she laid the groundwork for the movement today.
She did.
It's amazing how much progress there's been, but also how much work is left.
Yeah, especially with recent attacks on those freedoms.
It's like every step forward meets resistance.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a straight line.
No, the fight for equality.
Yeah.
It's rarely straightforward.
Right.
There are setbacks, counter movements.
But progress is possible.
It is.
And each generation builds on the struggles
of those who came before.
Uribe also mentions Simone de Beauvoir and her book, The Second Sex.
Right.
How did that book contribute?
That was revolutionary.
Okay.
De Beauvoir challenged traditional ideas about femininity and womanhood.
Okay.
She explored how it's society, not biology, that shapes our ideas about gender.
Interesting.
Her writing provided this framework for so much feminist thought.
Really?
Yeah, she encouraged women to question their roles and strive for self-determination.
So we're seeing all these threads,
Yeah.
fight for suffrage, questioning gender roles,
Right.
the influence of these thinkers,
Yeah, and
activists.
it's a complex movement.
It is, and that complexity continues today.
Okay.
Yuri brings up the #MeToo movement
Right.
as an example of how women are still fighting
Yeah.
for their rights and safety.
In the modern era.
Yeah, this movement, which took off in 2017,
Yeah.
gave a voice to survivors of sexual harassment and assault.
Yeah.
It exposed how widespread these issues are
Right.
and held perpetrators accountable. It felt like a watershed moment.
It did.
It brought these issues into the light in a way we hadn't seen before.
Exactly.
There's global conversation about power consent and systemic abuse.
It showed the power of women's voices and their willingness to speak out
against injustice.
Yeah, but it also showed the backlash that can happen.
When women challenge the status quo?
Yeah, and demand accountability.
It seems like the fight for equality is never really over.
Oh.
What are some of the issues that women are still dealing with?
Uribe points to things like the gender pay gap, reproducctive rights, the lack of women in power.
Okay.
These are just a few of the systemic inequalities.
It's disheartening to think these issues are still so big after all this activism and progress.
It makes you wonder, what will it take to finally get equality?
It takes a lot.
It takes challenging laws and policies, addressing unconscious biases, promoting equal opportunities in education and work, and creating a culture that values and respects women.
So it's not just about laws. It's about changing hearts and minds.
Exactly.
Creating a society where women are empowered to reach their potential and their voices are heard.
And valued.
Yeah, it's like history keeps hitting that undo button on women's progress.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how women,
they
keep pushing forward.
They do.
Even when people try to erase them.
And it makes you think how much richer our understanding of history could be if we knew more about women's roles. Like what discoveries, innovations, changes.
What are we missing?
Exactly.
Because those stories weren't told.
Right.
And speaking of connections, Uribe's lecture shows how the fight for women's rights
connects to so many other movements.
Absolutely. You can't separate gender equality from racial justice.
Right.
Economic fairness, LGBTQ plus rights.
They're all tied together.
They are.
And progress in one area, it affects the others.
Like a domino effect.
Right. And it shows that working towards a better world, it takes a multifaceted approach.
It does.
You can't just focus on one issue.
Right. You have to see the whole picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your biggest takeaway?
I'd say it's this.
Okay.
Never underestimate the power of history. When you see how hard women have fought for their rights.
Right.
you appreciate the progress more, and it makes you want to keep fighting for a better future.
That's a great point.
It reminds us we're all part of this story.
Well,
so to our listener, what resonated with you today?
What new insights did you gain about the fight for gender equality?
Both in history.
Yeah.
And now?
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep the conversation going.
That's what the deep dive is all about.